With that down, let's move on to main topic number 1. And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Jeremy, who writes, I am sitting here waiting for Sonic to begin and just read that it's going to dominate the box office this weekend with $57 million. Not bad for a movie that had some negative press and pushed back the release date. What are the chances this was the plan all along? Get people talking about the movie with a poor design and push the movie to a holiday weekend. All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, for those of you who may have missed it or did not hear, Sonic has come out and it has done, for a video game movie, very well. It's done very well for a video game movie, making $57 million. Now listen, I know we live in a day and age when we're used to a big movie opening and it makes $200 million. Don't let that distract you from the fact that for most other movies, an opening like $57 million is pretty damn solid. So let's take a look here at the quick opening weekend here. Coming in first place was Sonic the Hedgehog, making $57 million. Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey dropped less than 50%. Less than a 50% drop down to $17 million. But again, the smaller you open, the easier it is to have a smaller second weekend drop off. So that doesn't say a lot much, but Harley Quinn did make another $17 million. Fantasy Island, I have no idea, Rob, how Fantasy Island ended up making $12.4 million. How did a movie with no marketing, and they didn't even lift the review embargo until after the movie opened, like a full day after the movie opened in theaters, they lifted the review embargo. How on earth did that movie make? I think $12.4 million is remarkable. I would have guessed it was going to make 6. Would have been my guess, maybe 6, but it ended up making 12.4, and I have no idea how. The Photograph came in and bowed in with $12.2 million, and Bad Boys for Life hanging in there, man. It made another $11.3 million this weekend. But of course, the story for us right now is Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic taking in the money that it has. There's an interesting kind of angle to this that I'll talk about here, but I don't want to go into it too much. Jeremy is asking, what do you think the chances are that this was all part of a scheme on the part of the studio? This whole, design controversy and all that kind of stuff. Now, I heard some people, Rob, I even referenced them on the show a week or two ago. There were these insane tinfoil hat wearing lunatics suggesting this was all premeditated by the studio. They purposefully put out a trailer with a design that they knew people wouldn't like, and did that on purpose in order to get everybody talking about the movie, to only then later bring out the design they were planning on using all along, and then to move the release date from November, which, by the way, Forbes has a great article on this about how November, this movie would have got killed. Sonic would have got killed in November, but strategically moving it to a much better release date for it in February, and that this was all a big plan, Robert, all the machinations of the evil geniuses over there, that this was all planned. I'm going to share something that was interesting. So I had rejected this whole notion that this is what was going on. I had totally rejected it, shut it down, pushed it out. And then I had a conversation with somebody kind of connected to the situation. And what was revealed to me, now hear out this whole story before you jump to any conclusions. What was revealed to me was that whole insane tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theory may not have been that crazy. That there were, this is what was revealed to me, that there were conversations that were held about such a marketing ploy, get people talking, even if it's negatively, get them talking about the movie, come out with what they had planned to do all along, blah, 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 and ride the wave of that and get a boost. And I had heard from somebody close to the situation over there that is indeed what it was. That the studio had purposefully manipulated the audience in creating a false fake controversy in order to get more buzz going, because they always planned on having the certain design and they always planned on moving the date. I was getting ready then to make that a topic on the John Campea Show last week. Or I was getting ready to say, sorry. So that conversation happens, blah, 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 blah. So last night I put up on Twitter this little tease about today's show saying, you know what, this whole tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theory, there may be something to it because I had a conversation with somebody that kind of suggests that it might be real. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. So I put that up. And the reason it is not a topic, why you're not going to see a headline about that on any of my YouTube videos, is because the person who told me that saw my tweet, got back in touch with me and said, hey, you can go ahead and do that as a story, but just so you know, all those things I told you, I wasn't there personally firsthand to witness it. I'm just telling you what I heard happened. So then I'm like, well, see, now it's not a matter of whether I believe you. Now it's a matter of whether I believe the person who I don't know who told you. And now there's just so many links in this chain that could be weak and nonsense that I decided to delete my tweet, number one, and number two, not run it as a story here today. So I am back to believing that it is just a stupid tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theory. So let's get back to talk about the box office as it is. I think $57 million, Rob, for this has to be considered a giant win. Now, this movie is still far from breaking even, but this is a good start. As a matter of fact, if you don't take inflation into account, this is the biggest opening weekend that a video game-based movie has ever had domestically at $57 million. That's not a high standard, granted, but it's still the best opening domestically for a video game adaptation ever. That's got to be considered a win. And again, I know there are a lot of us folks that are used to now hearing about these high-profile movies opening with 120 million, 170 million, 200 million. I get it, but don't let that skew your perspective of the relative nature of how big of a box office opening this is for a movie like this. This is a movie that easily could have opened at 35. I think this is a movie that easily could have opened at 35. And quite frankly, I don't even think 35 would have been all that terrible for it. I think 57 million, Rob, for a movie that is a lot better than I thought it would be, still mediocre at best, but I think this has got to be considered a big win. Rob, you take a look at this situation. You see the opening weekend that it had, understanding that it costs like $85 million to make. It's spent around $50 million on marketing. It's going to need around $200 million to break even, but it's well on its way to that. How do you see a $57 million opening weekend for a movie like Sonic?
Well, I think it's a big win, and to speak to the tinfoil hat theory, I would say, that might have been a brilliant way to market a movie, but the problem is I don't think it works when you have to go back and spend however much money they had to spend on visual effects to alter or change the look of Sonic, unless that was built into the budget. But I just
right, but
can't.
you know what I had to say about that, right? Like I don't think it cost them next to anything, because remember, all the rigging and animation was done. All they had to do was slap the new model on it and re-render it out. So that really wouldn't have been that big of a consideration.
I just think that I just can't buy into that. I mean, I think
neither can I.
Yeah, I can't. It still costs money. They still had to pay. But the thing that I like about this is, I was talking a little bit about this yesterday on my show, whether fan input should ever be considered when it comes to these properties. And I think it was interesting, regardless of whether it was planned or not, they didn't know about the outcry. They couldn't have known how vocal the outcry to change the Sonic look was going to be. So that would have been a risk. But it was really interesting that they responded. I'd choose to believe that they responded to an audience outcry. They had the opportunity to make a change, and the change worked. And I think that people have liked this movie. They're saying by the end of today, which is a holiday, obviously President's Day, the movie might do 70 million domestic. And that's pretty great. I mean, it's never good, John, when a movie doesn't succeed. I always love it, whether I'm interested in the movie or not. I was never a big Sonic fan because I just didn't play the game. But I love the fact that people who liked Sonic have gone out to see this. It's a family movie. I've seen a lot of tweets from people. They like this film. And isn't that what movies are all about? They're supposed to be entertaining. This movie wasn't a resounding disappointment the way Assassin's Creed, say, was. And I think it's great for everybody involved. I like to see that Paramount gets to put a win. They get to check a win box for this one, because poor Paramount, one of my favorite studios, has not been They have not been hashtag winning lately, John. And I want to see this movie do well for them. I want to see Top Gun Maverick do well. I want to see about those Mission Impossible movies coming down the pike. I'm glad to see that people are liking this movie. Sonic fans are liking this movie, and the movie's making money, which is good for everybody. So,
dude, if you had told me 2 weeks ago, when all the big positive hype about Harley Quinn Birds of Prey started getting around about how great the movie was going to be and everything, if you had told me 2 weeks ago, and Sonic, which I thought looked like absolute garbage, if you had told me 2 weeks ago, Campea, you're going to like Sonic more than you like Birds of Prey, I would have called you crazy. And yet here we are, living in Crazy Town. Sonic, I believe, and that's all subjective, and there are going to be people that have different opinions, and that's perfectly fine. To me, Sonic was a better movie than Harley Quinn Birds of Prey. I mean, look, I don't think the movie was great. I don't. But I mentioned this in the review. This movie is targeted at two very specific demographics. It's targeted at children, and it's targeted at adults who are in love with the Sonic character. If you are in either one of those camps, I think you're really going to enjoy this movie. I think if you're outside that camp, you may not like it that much. But even somebody like me who is outside that camp, I didn't think it was all that good. But again, it really wasn't all that bad. It was far better than I thought it would be. And I think it's great whenever a movie that can come in and exceed your expectations quality-wise. I think it's especially great when they succeed financially.
You know what else, too, that I'm actually happy about? I've actually watched a lot of Jim Carrey. He's been out on the circuit, tub-thumping the movie, and he's really done his part in terms of hitting all the different morning shows and late-night talk shows. He was on the BBC answering questions from kids. And it's really interesting, when I was watching him do that, there was a lot of kids that were writing in or recording in, or however you want to calling in, and talking about how much they loved Jim Carrey's past performances, like in Ace Ventura and The Mask and things like that. And I think it's great for Jim Carrey. I think this movie is actually a big win for him as well, bringing classic vintage Carreyisms back, and he needed a hit too. And I think it's really great to see. I've always been a fan of Jim Carrey, and the fact that he was able to do movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I think is a marvelous film, and also his Ace Ventura movies or The Mask, or even like Cable Guy. I like to see an actor come back, and even though this might not have been the movie that he wanted to become a big hit, it has, and I think partly because he has come out in support of this movie. I mean, I know it's part of his contract, but he was very enthusiastic about it, and it's good to see him get a win from this as well.
I'll tell you what, just to repeat what I said about Jim Carrey before, listen, the Sonic character, despite there are some bad effects and very bad compositing and all that kind of stuff, the Sonic character works in the movie. James Marsden's character works in the movie. Jim Carrey steals this movie. And, Rob, you and I talked before about, seeing that Jim Carrey was going to be in this, it could have gone one of two ways. It very easily could have gone the way of a very sad, pathetic demonstration of a once high-profile actor desperately trying to, go back to his wonky ways, and it just comes across as sad and pathetic or whatever. That is not what happened here. This was vintage, prime, glorious Jim Carrey in a very weird role that I never would have thought you could cast him in. And he went in there. He made it. Again, there are other elements about the movie that do work, but for me, Jim Carrey was a standout. Every time Jim Carrey was on the screen as Dr. Robotnik was something to watch. And it was like, watching classic, vintage, prime Jim Carrey again. And that part really, really works on that level. So anyway, guys, let's put it over to you. What do you think about the $57 million opening? I'm sure there are some of you who are like, poof, that's nothing. I watch all these other movies make over 100. That's nothing. That's cool. But do you think like we do? Hey, listen, not all films do that. For a lot of films, opening with $57 million is a win. And I see this as a win. How do you guys see it? Jump on down into the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right.